So hey guys, it's Zion again, and we're back. And I really don't want to bring you much more Black Ops 2. I don't want to bring you much more Battlefield 3. Not because I don't like those games anymore, because I still enjoy them. They're still very good games. But the problem I'm facing now is that I will not be covering first-person shooters forever. Because as far as I'm concerned, the first-person shooter as a genre has run its course. You see that in the competitive scene, there's not much in the way of first-person shooters. Black Ops is really the only one that has any staying power, at least right now, and that's only because Treyarch and Activision are pushing it really hard. The success of MLG Anaheim tells me that there is still a place for competitive first-person shooters, and the continuing success of COD 4 Pro Mod competitive, despite the fact that it is dying slowly, tells me that yes, there is still a place for shooters, but the fact that League of Legends, Dota, StarCraft, and a whole host of other games are vastly more successful on a vastly more consistent basis, for me, says that I need to find something else to bring to my YouTube channel and to fill my gaming time with, because I think the shooter is, at its core, a very simplistic game. There are people on a map, you go shoot them. In Battlefield, there are a lot of people on a big map, go shoot them, and then hold the button for 30 seconds so you can arm an objective. And I hope that takes away nothing from the fact that I do enjoy shooters, and I probably always will. But in the future, I don't want to base my YouTube channel on Call of Duty and Battlefield alone. I don't think it's a good model for success, it's not a good model for entertainment, and I am going to be getting Splinter Cell Blacklist and Watch Dogs when they come out this holiday, or fall, or whatever it is these games are coming out. And I want to bring you coverage of those, be it single player or multiplayer, or probably both. Depending on which one single player I like better, I'll be doing a Let's Play of it, and if I can get some people involved, I will most certainly be doing the co-op of Blacklist. And so I want to make that transition as smooth as possible. I don't want one day to just say to you guys, I'm not playing Black Ops 2 anymore, or Battlefield anymore, and those of you who subscribe for both of those games can suck it. No, that's not what I want to do. I want there to be a nice transition. Those people who subscribed only for shooter content and don't want to see Watch Dogs or Blacklist or other games, then by all means, you are welcome to unsubscribe when the transition happens. But I want there to be a nice, easy flow, because I like nice, easy flow, and there's a sex joke in there somewhere, I'm sure. But before I turn this into a full-blown update video, let me get onto the topic at hand, which is the fact that at E3, and I know this is old, this gameplay is old, Square Enix said that they were changing the name of Final Fantasy Versus 13 to Final Fantasy 15, and this means a couple things to me. First of all, it means that they have done enough to differentiate the game from the 13 series that they don't feel it fits anymore. And more importantly, that it has the strength to stand independent of the fiction they've already built up with Final Fantasy 13. And let me preface the rest of this conversation by saying that I played Final Fantasy 13, I did not finish it, because that game was a grind for me. More than any Final Fantasy had been a grind, because in Final Fantasies prior, if you got to a point in a game where you couldn't beat a boss, for whatever reason, he was too strong, you didn't have the abilities you needed, whatever it was, you would grind for a level. And that's fine, that's something that has to get done sometimes, is you need to grind just to get your level up, or just to enjoy the world and see what the encounters are like. But then there was Final Fantasy 13, which was essentially just a very, very extended collection of corridors with between 20 and 40 monsters for you to fight, all of whom had an enormous amount of health, and all of whom felt like, for me at least, like I was fighting a mini boss battle. I should not have to spend 10 minutes on an encounter and then do it 10 more times. I think a random encounter should be a challenge for the state at which the player is in that game, but it should not be a test of his skills, a test of his characters. That's just silly. But more importantly, from my perspective, being trained in the analytical arts of English and looking at stories from a critical perspective, there was almost no value in any of the characters in Final Fantasy XIII. Of all of them, I could say Saz, the black guy with an afro who had a chocobo in his hair. He was the only one who, at least for me, had any depth. He was the only character with any roundness to him. Lightning had all the bad traits that made Cloud an interesting character, but none of the good traits. Snow was a stereotypical anime male hero. Hope was the whiny 14-year-old bitch. And then there's Vanille, who, don't get me started on Vanille, and then Fang, who they had designed initially to be a guy and then flipped to be a female for reasons that I do not recall at the moment. And the question becomes, was she interesting? Yes, she was interesting. I would call her a close second to Saz. But that's not saying much, because Saz was fairly stereotypical in his own right. And it got to a point in that game where I just said, I do not care enough about the world, its characters, or this story to continue playing. But I had always thought, and the E3 almost seemed to confirm this, that Final Fantasy Versus 13 was being developed by a separate team. And the team, I hope, composed of the people who made the Final Fantasy series successful, the people who have a legacy in 7, in 6, in 8, and not in the 8s, the 9s, the 10s, which are a little more stereotypically modern anime-style games, which is not to say that they are all anime all the time, but there's some certain stereotypes you can draw from that genre of animation. And so this rebranding, for me, is a good thing, because it gives me hope that because there has been a completely separate team working on Final Fantasy, what is now 15, that the story will be separate, independent, the mechanics will be new, the story will be relevant, which they're trying to make it be, and it will be back to what made Final Fantasy the series that it is, the powerful, poignant series, but still be able to break new ground and bring new people into the franchise by making a story that's familiar and interesting, with characters that make you feel, not just characters that make you want to throw your face against a monitor. And most importantly, from a technical standpoint, they'll be using better hardware. Final Fantasy XIII, for all its technical success, was limited by the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 hardware. There are certain things you simply could not do in Final Fantasy XIII that you can likely do in Final Fantasy XV, simply because you're not limited so much by the hardware. And so I think there'll be a more focus on the open world, because in the old Final Fantasies, what made them successful is that they sacrificed a lot of visual fidelity for epicness and grandness of scope. Final Fantasy VII was not the best looking game on the PS1, had some of the best looking cinematics, but they were pre-rendered, so they were compressed and repackaged, so they weren't in-engine, it took up a lot less space. Final Fantasy VIII and IX were similar. Final Fantasy X was a similar length as well, but again, they had new hardware, they could do more things. And then Final Fantasy XIII comes along, and they're too ambitious. So much so that they have to really constrain everything. And they rectified the situation somewhat with 13.2 and 13.3, which is coming out, but it's going to be 13.3 for me, despite what they call it. And they're trying to make it more open world, more what the Final Fantasy series was successful with. And I see that Final Fantasy 15 is not pushing the boundaries of what the PS4 and Xbox One are probably capable of, as far as a graphical fidelity standpoint. Yes, it looks better than Final Fantasy 13. Yes, it looks better than any game we have seen from Square in a long, long time. But it isn't taking the machine and pushing it to its limits and then breaking them. We haven't gotten to that point in the life cycle of these consoles yet, and we won't for a while. But the thing for me here is that Square is sacrificing a little bit of the graphical power and putting more of that memory into the gameplay, so the game can be extended to be the 40-50 hour open world, interesting, engrossing, immersive experience that Final Fantasies have been in the past. And if this is what they're doing and they're successful with it, I think Final Fantasy will be back at the top of the RPG ladder, and that it'll stay there.